A guy scammed me, so I ruined his life. I never expected a single contract to change the course of 3 lives, but when I walked into that sprawling mansion, cameras hidden in corners and vehicles, I realized that some deceptions are far more dangerous than they seem. My client was rich, arrogant, and utterly convinced that his wife was unfaithful. Every instinct I had told me this case would be straightforward proof of betrayal, a tidy paycheck at the end. Yet, even in my experience, I had never encountered a situation where truth would be so inconvenient. Neither he nor I knew what we were about to uncover. For 3 years, I had worked as a private investigator. Patience, precision, and discretion were the pillars of my work. Most cases were straightforward: insurance fraud, missing persons, corporate espionage. But when a client as wealthy and arrogant as this one walked through my office doors, insisting that his wife was cheating, I knew that this would not be ordinary. The air in his office carried an overconfident arrogance, a subtle disdain for everyone around him, and a kind of blind certainty that money could bend reality to his will. The contract was simple: 6 months of surveillance and reporting, payment due upon completion. My unit, a small team of seasoned investigators, had access to every tool available: hidden cameras, GPS trackers, audio recording devices, and vehicles equipped for tailing anyone without notice. We began by surveying the mansion and the wife's daily routine, noting the entrances, exits, and the peculiar habits of the household staff. It was a sprawling property, with high walls, manicured gardens, and a driveway that twisted around to a concealed garage. What we found was unexpected. The wife, whose face carried a quiet serenity, was a woman devoted to her community. Every morning she volunteered at the local soup kitchen, helping distribute food to those in need. Afternoons were spent visiting children's hospitals, reading to patients, offering gentle comfort to those who needed it most. She coordinated canned food drives at local churches, ensuring that no family went hungry. She did all this without fanfare or recognition, simply because it was the right thing to do. Her humility was striking, and I remember one moment vividly when she helped a mother calm a crying toddler by simply kneeling and singing softly with no expectation of reward. And then there was the husband, a man whose wealth had granted him a sense of impunity. Our cameras recorded him bringing multiple women into the house on the same day, sometimes 2 or 3 in quick succession. He moved through his life with a smug confidence, oblivious to the truth being quietly collected around him. His arrogance was almost theatrical, as if he believed himself untouchable, invincible, above morality. Initially, my team and I were detached observers, chronicling the daily rhythm of a household that was far more complex than anyone realized. Yet slowly, an emotional undercurrent began to pull at me. I found myself reflecting on fairness, morality, and the consequences of deceit. There were nights when I sat alone in my car, reviewing footage and thinking about the lives we were witnessing. The quiet dignity of one person contrasted with the blatant selfishness of another. The first few weeks of surveillance were deceptively quiet. Every morning, my team and I would converge on our assigned positions, cameras hidden in inconspicuous corners of the mansion and in the wife's vehicle. We observed her leaving the house, noting the gentle way she greeted neighbors, the small gestures that revealed her empathy. Each day, she seemed unaware of our presence, moving with a natural grace, unaware that her life was under a microscope. At first, the routine was monotonous, logging timestamps, checking footage, following her errands. Yet slowly, patterns emerged. She would stop at the same local bakery, always offering a smile to the cashier, occasionally buying pastries for staff or patrons. She would make her way to the children's hospital, kneeling to speak with patients, holding the hands of parents anxious about their children's health. I remember one day watching her hand a small stuffed toy to a little girl who had been waiting for a visitor for hours. It was such a simple act, yet it struck me profoundly. Meanwhile, the husband's behavior grew increasingly reckless. He entertained guests lavishly in the mansion, hosting private dinners that ended with women lingering late into the night. We captured multiple instances of him sneaking women into the house through side entrances, sometimes twice in a single evening. The contrast between his behavior and his wife's integrity was stark, almost cinematic in its clarity. As investigators, we are trained to remain detached, but even the most seasoned among us could not ignore the moral juxtaposition playing out before our eyes. I found myself reflecting on human nature, on how one person could embody generosity while the other thrived in selfishness. By the second month, the volume of footage was immense. Every day I sifted through hours of recordings, noting patterns, cataloging minor details that might one day be relevant. The mundane moments. Her smiling at a stranger holding a door open for an elderly neighbor became as important as the larger acts of charity. They painted a complete picture, a narrative of integrity that was impossible to dispute. There were moments that surprised even our experienced team. One afternoon, I watched her spend nearly 3 hours organizing donated clothes at a local shelter. She moved methodically, sorting items by size, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Her dedication was quiet, almost invisible to the world, yet our cameras captured it in stark contrast to the husband's flamboyant disregard for responsibility. By the 3rd month, I found myself anticipating certain routines, almost knowing when she would stop to speak to someone, when she would hand out a snack to a child, or offer comforting words to someone in distress. Our surveillance was supposed to be clinical, detached, but it became a subtle form of meditation, a study in human goodness. I began writing small notes for the team about the observations. Kindness in small acts often speaks louder than words. Integrity shines even when no one is watching. These observations were not just professional. They were quietly shaping the way I thought about morality and choices. Halfway through the contract, I found myself sitting alone in a parked car, reviewing footage from the previous weeks. I realized that the husband's arrogance blinded him to reality. His belief in entitlement and manipulation could not mask the truth of his wife's unwavering integrity. This realization sparked a deeper reflection on the work we do. As investigators, we often focus on uncovering wrongdoing, but in this case, the truth was a quiet affirmation of goodness. It was rare, almost surreal, to witness virtue so plainly, untainted by selfish motives. One evening, I observed her sitting in a park feeding pigeons and sketching in a small notebook. It was an unremarkable scene to any passerby, but for those of us watching, it was a profound glimpse into a life lived with purpose and compassion. Even the simple act of feeding pigeons seemed imbued with patience and tenderness. By the 4th month, it was time for the midterm review. Our captain assembled the team and presented the evidence to the client. We went through hours of video, meticulously cataloged, annotated with timestamps and locations. Audio recordings captured conversations that were entirely innocent, mundane, yet undeniably revealing of character. The client's reactions were telling. Expectation gave way to confusion, confusion to frustration. He had anticipated scandal, betrayal, drama, and instead, he was confronted with the undeniable truth of his wife's fidelity. Our captain's presence was commanding. He reminded the client that the contract was not about delivering an outcome that satisfied personal biases, but about documenting reality. The husband's protests, though persistent, could not obscure the clarity of the evidence laid before him. It was a moment that resonated with all of us. Justice, we realized, wasn't about satisfying personal vendettas. It was about observing truth and holding it intact, even when inconvenient or unexpected. The final months of the contract were uneventful in the sense that nothing surprising occurred from the wife's behavior. She continued her volunteer work, maintained her routines, and exhibited the same quiet integrity that had become so evident over the past months. But the husband's behavior escalated. He began testing boundaries, bringing guests at odd hours, flaunting his wealth, seemingly attempting to provoke a reaction. Our cameras captured everything, yet still, she remained unaware, focused on her responsibilities and her personal commitments. When the 6-month contract officially ended, our team submitted all reports and evidence, expecting the final payment to follow promptly. Instead, we were met with refusal. The client claimed dissatisfaction, alleging that the contract had failed because it did not reveal infidelity. It was a bitter betrayal, payment withheld, trust violated. The moral clarity of the past months now clashed with the practical realities of human greed and entitlement. Our team convened to discuss options. Anger was palpable, but our professionalism dictated a higher standard. Blackmail was an option tempting, given the evidence we held, but it was beneath us. Instead, I remembered the wife, the woman who had lived with unwavering integrity despite her husband's deceptions. I reached out requesting a private meeting. When she arrived, I carefully explained everything, presenting the evidence with clarity and compassion. Her reaction was immediate and profound. Shock, disbelief, relief, and heartbreak intertwined. Tears flowed freely, and for a moment, the weight of the past months seemed to manifest physically in the room. Providing her with copies of the evidence and guidance on legal counsel was an act of responsibility. It was a moment where justice intersected with truth, and the potential for resolution began to emerge. 6 months of meticulous surveillance had passed, and our team had amassed hundreds of hours of footage. Every corner of the mansion had been observed, every errand recorded, every interaction documented. Yet, the husband's behavior remained predictably erratic, as if he were daring the universe to challenge him. There were evenings when he hosted lavish parties, the music pulsing through the walls, laughter and chatter spilling into the night. Women came and went, with almost casual disregard, their presence in sharp contrast to the quiet dignity of his wife. When the contract officially ended, we compiled a comprehensive report. Every detail was noted with precision: dates, times, actions, locations. The evidence was irrefutable, and yet, when presented to him, he recoiled. He expected scandal, betrayal, a narrative to confirm his suspicions. Instead, he was confronted with the truth. His wife had not strayed, not once, and the life he believed he was entitled to dominate was built on assumptions and pride. Our captain's words during the debrief were firm. We were hired to document reality, not to manufacture satisfaction. Your dissatisfaction does not alter the facts. The husband's frustration was evident, his face flushing with anger and disbelief. He had envisioned a contract that would serve his ego, yet reality refused to comply. A week later, we received word from the office. The husband had refused to pay the final installment of the contract. He attempted to leverage dissatisfaction as justification for withholding funds. It was a betrayal, not just of us, but of the professional agreement we had upheld. Anger simmered among the team, yet it was tempered by the knowledge that integrity demanded a careful response. We discussed options. Blackmail, though tempting given the wealth of incriminating material we possessed, felt beneath our standards. Instead, I recalled the wife, the person whose unwavering integrity had been the constant in this chaotic environment. We reached out to her, arranging a private meeting in a neutral, quiet location. When she arrived, the gravity of the situation became apparent. Her expression held a mixture of fatigue and caution. A woman who had navigated life with quiet grace, now faced with revelations that could reshape her reality. I laid out the evidence, presenting it with care, explaining the months of observation, the behavior of her husband, and the meticulous documentation we had collected. Tears came unbidden, and for a long moment, she could only weep. The weight of betrayal, long unacknowledged, pressed down on her. Watching her process, the truth was gut-wrenching, yet necessary. She had a right to know, and we had a duty to present it accurately. After the initial shock passed, she listened intently, asking questions, seeking clarification on what had been recorded and how it could be used to protect her interests. I advised her to seek legal counsel, providing her with copies of all evidence and our professional contact information. It was a delicate balance, supporting her without imposing, guiding without influencing beyond the facts. Her gratitude was quiet, expressed in a firm handshake and a few heartfelt words. Months passed. The legal process began, and we were summoned to testify as part of the lawsuit our company had filed for fraud and breach of contract. The husband's defense attempted to frame our work as inadequate, arguing that we had failed because no infidelity was discovered. Yet the court required proof of action, not fulfillment of a biased expectation. Our documentation spoke for itself: timestamps, recordings, logs, and consistent observation demonstrating that the contract had been executed faithfully. The judgment was decisive. Payment was awarded in full, affirming the validity of our work. The husband, meanwhile, faced the personal consequences of his actions. Armed with evidence, the wife pursued divorce proceedings, securing property, assets, and the moral vindication that had eluded her for so long. It was a victory of integrity over deceit, a rare instance where truth prevailed in both professional and personal spheres. 6 months after the court ruling, fate orchestrated an unexpected reunion. I encountered the wife in a public setting, a casual meeting that felt anything but coincidental. Conversation flowed naturally, tentative at first, then more comfortably, as trust reestablished itself. We shared coffee, laughter, and reflections, forming a connection rooted in respect and shared understanding. In the chaos of deceit, honesty had emerged unscathed, and a bond grew where suspicion and betrayal once lingered. During this time, I often reflected on the lessons learned from this contract. Surveillance, observation, and documentation are tools, but the ethical choices surrounding their use define the outcome. Our decision to inform the wife rather than exploit the footage was a defining moment, one that reinforced the importance of integrity in a profession often tempted by shortcuts. Life, I realized, is less about anticipating betrayal and more about observing the subtle expressions of character. The wife's consistent kindness, her patience, and her quiet dedication to helping others provided a counterpoint to the husband's recklessness. In many ways, the months of surveillance had transformed from an assignment into a study of human morality, a reminder that virtue can flourish even when challenged by dishonesty. Our unit continued to work together, reflecting on the case as an exemplar of professional and moral responsibility. Each member drew lessons in empathy, patience, and the delicate balance between observation and interference. We discussed the psychological impact of watching a life unfold in such detail, the subtle moral judgments we all made, and the ethical imperatives that guided our choices. The wife, now divorced, began a new chapter of her life. She retained her privacy but remained active in her community, continuing the volunteer work that had so impressed us. Her strength lay not just in her moral character, but in her ability to process betrayal without letting it define her. It was a lesson in resilience, in the quiet power of integrity. Reflecting on my own life, I realized that the experience had changed me as well. I approached new cases with a keener sense of empathy, a deeper understanding of the moral complexities inherent in human behavior. The intersection of justice, ethics, and human emotion had never been so vividly illustrated as it was during those 6 months of observation. Evenings when I reviewed footage or sat in my office reflecting were filled with thoughts about the consequences of action and inaction. The husband's arrogance had almost gone unchallenged, but the careful application of professional standards had ensured that truth triumphed. The wife's eventual empowerment and recovery underscored the importance of integrity in shaping outcomes that extend beyond monetary or professional gain. Our team remained in contact with her, offering support and guidance as needed, without encroaching on her autonomy. It was a delicate balance, one that required sensitivity, patience, and a commitment to ethical conduct. This relationship, built on mutual respect, demonstrated that professional responsibility can intersect with personal care in profound and unexpected ways. Through this experience, I learned that surveillance and investigation are not merely technical skills. They are moral exercises. The choices we make in how we use information, whom we inform, and how we act on knowledge define the ethical landscape of our work. Integrity is not passive. It requires action, often difficult and uncomfortable, but always necessary to uphold truth and justice. Months later, our unexpected reunion in the mall revealed something even deeper, that human connection can emerge from the most challenging circumstances. Trust, once broken or threatened, can be rebuilt through transparency, honesty, and consistent ethical choices. It was a lesson in the resilience of the human spirit and in the possibility of finding meaningful connection after witnessing betrayal and deception. As I recount this story, I recognize that justice is rarely immediate. Truth, wielded responsibly, is more powerful than vengeance. Integrity can prevail, even when confronted by wealth, arrogance, and false assumptions. The most profound stories of human resilience and morality are often quiet, lived in daily acts of honesty and courage rather than sensational headlines. And sometimes, those acts intersect with fate in ways that transform lives, creating connections where none were expected and restoring balance where deceit once reigned. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to Tale Hub for more immersive stories and heartfelt journeys. Your support means everything. Each morning began in silence, a ritual that my team and I had perfected over months. Vehicles stationed at precise distances from the mansion, cameras hidden in trees, light poles, and the wife's car, all connected to a network that allowed real-time monitoring. I watched the city wake up, the faint glow of streetlights giving way to dawn, the quiet hum of early traffic, the occasional pedestrian hurrying along cracked sidewalks, coffee in hand, unaware of the careful observation unfolding around them. The wife's route was predictable, yet elegant in its consistency. She walked the same streets, greeted the same shopkeepers, paused briefly at crosswalks to let children pass, and took the same route to the hospital. Every step was observed, catalogued, and logged. Yet, in watching her, I found moments of unplanned beauty, an elderly man struggling with grocery bags, and she, without hesitation, offering her assistance. A stray dog tangled in a leash, freed by her careful hands. A child's laughter echoing as she handed out small toys. These small actions, repeated daily, accumulated into a portrait of a life lived with quiet heroism. Our team operated like clockwork. One member monitored the mansion's entrances, another followed her car through the streets. A third kept an eye on her volunteer activities, ensuring coverage even when she left familiar areas. We rotated shifts to maintain vigilance, taking notes, time-stamping footage, and discussing anomalies in hushed tones during brief breaks in parking lots or coffee shops. The work was exhaustive, yet the payoff, the clarity of truth, was invaluable. During these long hours, I often reflected on the contrasts I had witnessed. The husband, in his mansion, lived in a self-contained world of indulgence, reckless and arrogant. Each night, the party noises, laughter, music, glass clinking, reminded me of the moral chasm between him and his wife. She, unperturbed, continued her routines, unaffected by wealth or status, driven solely by a commitment to kindness and integrity. One afternoon, I trailed her to a small park where she volunteered with local children. She guided them through art projects, sitting cross-legged on the grass, encouraging each child with patience and warmth. One little boy struggled with a simple drawing of a house. She knelt beside him, gently suggesting changes, praising his efforts, and lifting his confidence. Observing this, I realized that true character is often revealed in moments unnoticed by the world. Yet these moments have profound impact. Back in the surveillance van, my thoughts often drifted. How easily assumptions can cloud judgment, how arrogance can blind someone to reality. The husband's desire to control narrative and perception was futile against the quiet consistency of truth. My mind replayed the countless small interactions I had recorded, the smiles, the acts of generosity, the empathy shown in tiny gestures. These were the markers of human goodness, the evidence that some lives are defined not by wealth or status, but by moral choices. The day we presented the final report to the husband remains etched in my memory. 6 hours of meticulously compiled footage, audio, and logs displayed in chronological order. The weight of accumulated truth filled the room, and the husband's reactions moved through stages: disbelief, irritation, and finally, a stifled rage. He could not argue with the facts. No lies, no manipulation, no distortion could change the reality before him. After he stormed out, refusing to pay, we gathered as a team. The sense of betrayal was palpable, but our focus shifted quickly to strategy. We discussed the ethical options, weighing potential actions. Blackmail was tempting, financially advantageous, but it was beneath our professional integrity. Instead, we turned to the person most affected by his deception, his wife. The meeting with her was quiet, emotionally charged, and transformative. She sat across from me, absorbing the footage, processing months of hidden truths. Her initial reaction was shock, disbelief, and heartbreak. Tears flowed freely as the weight of betrayal pressed down, and for a moment the room was filled with raw emotion. Yet beneath the sorrow, there was clarity, the recognition that truth could now empower her, not just inform her. I guided her carefully, explaining the implications, advising legal counsel, and providing her with copies of all evidence. It was a moment of profound responsibility. We were not there to sway her decisions, but to arm her with knowledge and ensure her protection. She expressed gratitude in quiet, measured tones, a mix of relief and determination. In the following months, the legal process unfolded. Our company's lawsuit against the husband for breach of contract and fraud proceeded efficiently. The husband's defense claimed failure to deliver, but contracts are bound by facts, not personal desires. The court considered the evidence, timestamps, videos, and logs, proving the contract had been executed meticulously. Judgment was in our favor, and full payment was secured. The wife pursued divorce proceedings simultaneously, supported by the evidence we had provided. The outcome was equitable. Property, vehicles, and financial security were secured, alongside the vindication of her moral integrity. The husband faced both legal and personal consequences for his deception and arrogance. Months later, fate intervened in an unassuming location, a local mall. We collided unexpectedly, and the interaction was charged with history and relief. Conversation began cautiously but quickly flowed naturally, laughter and reflections filling the space. Coffee became a shared ritual, opportunities for quiet moments of connection and understanding, founded on honesty and mutual respect. The months following revealed that trust, once fractured, can be rebuilt through transparency, ethical conduct, and shared experiences. Our interactions reinforced the lessons learned. Integrity, once maintained, empowers others and fosters meaningful connection. The wife, once a subject of observation, became a partner in conversation, trust growing naturally as shared history lent depth to our bond. Each day of surveillance, each careful observation, each moral choice culminated in outcomes that were not merely professional, but profoundly human. The work transformed from an assignment into a meditation on the nature of character, the importance of ethical decision-making, and the quiet triumph of virtue over arrogance and deception. Through this journey, I realized that surveillance and investigation are not just technical endeavors. They are ethical exercises. The decisions we make about information, its disclosure, and the manner of its use define not only outcomes, but the moral fabric of our profession. The choice to empower the wife, rather than exploit her husband, was a defining moment, reaffirming the power of integrity over opportunism. Reflecting on these months, I understand that justice is rarely immediate, yet its pursuit shapes both professional and personal life. Truth, when wielded responsibly, is far more powerful than vengeance. Integrity, patience, and careful observation are the instruments that allow justice to prevail. And sometimes, the smallest acts, kindness, attentiveness, moral courage, can ripple outward, transforming lives in ways that money or status cannot. Life's lessons often arrive quietly, in moments unnoticed by the world. The wife's consistent acts of compassion, patience, and generosity provided a stark contrast to her husband's arrogance. Each interaction she engaged in, every small deed, collectively forged a narrative of goodness, a lesson for all who observed. In the end, the story concluded not with drama, but with connection. Our reunion in the mall symbolized a return to equilibrium, a world where truth, justice, and integrity intersect to create meaningful human bonds. The experiences reshaped my understanding of morality, professional responsibility, and the profound effects of ethical conduct in complex human situations. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to Tale Hub for more immersive stories and heartfelt journeys. Your support means everything, and it allows us to continue sharing stories that matter.